Now this table has been a long time coming for my sister and brother-in-law, and actually they've had it for a little while, and this video is finally making its way to your eyes. But I honestly thought that I had ruined this table before I got started. So we've skipped over the milling process. You've seen me do that a bunch of times. Use the jointer and use the planer to get the material down to the thickness that I wanted, which the problem was it ended up much thinner than I wanted. So this tabletop was actually kind of flimsy, and I thought that I ruined it. Over here at the table saw, I'm cutting things down to their final width, which is dynamic. It changes for every single one, so I take a measurement of the thinnest spot on the board, adjust my brand new, super powerful Harvey table saw, which I think is the first time you guys have seen this on the YouTube channel. It is an awesome saw. It's 4 horsepower. It chews through this hickory like it's not even there, like it's a piece of paper. But anyway, we're cutting these boards down to their final width, which is again dynamic based on the width of the board, not going for anything in particular. Just making sure we get maximum out of each board. Once everything is cut out, I'm using the workbench to be able to lay out and visualize the entire tabletop. And I am flipping some boards around to make sure we have kind of a seamless, beautiful color from side to side. And I really think it turned out nice. I love hickory. Hickory is an absolute pain in the neck to work with. It is like sanding concrete, but it's just a gorgeous wood, and I know that putting the work in now is going to allow for a table that lasts a long, long time. While we have the table laid out on the workbench, I'm making some marks so that I can cut some biscuit joints. The biscuit joiner is kind of a new tool to me in the shop. I've used them before. They don't actually add any structural strength to the tabletop themselves. It just helps for alignment while clamping to be a little bit easier and a little bit faster. I am considering making and selling tables as a physical side business to this hobby or to this business, so that's when I sprung for the biscuit joiner to allow me to glue up the tabletops a little bit faster. Once we have all those biscuit joints, also known as plate joints, cut, we need to make sure they're cleaned out because I have forgotten to clean them out in the past, and the biscuit doesn't seat all the way down, which then prevents your table from gluing up and having a seamless joint, which totally defeats the purpose of the biscuit joint to begin with. Making sure to apply plenty of glue. In this situation, I am using Titebond 2 because it is waterproof enough for a table, and then it'll have a seamless looking joint with the hickory tabletop. If you were to use Titebond 3, you'd have a little bit of a darker line for the glue line. Laying everything out and making sure we got proper clamping pressure all throughout the table using my biggest Bessie clamps. Now you can see I only, in the video here at least, add clamps along the bottom, but you want to make sure that you're not adding any bow into the tabletop, and you may have to add some clamps with the bar on the top to make sure to counteract any bowing that you might be putting in place. Once the tabletop has set up, I'm pretty sure I left this one overnight, it is time to do a whole bunch of prepping. I started by using a card scraper, much faster than a sander, and with this I was able to go over all those joints to make sure they are perfectly smooth. Now sharpening a card scraper is not difficult. It is a little bit of a acquired skill to make sure you're actually scraping versus just sliding over the board, but much faster than a sander. And here I'm using some CA glue with some fast acting activator to make sure that any cracks or fissures or imperfections in the wood are filled in so that we will be perfectly smooth when all is said and done. And this is the underside of the table that I'm working on right now, so you'll see that wider piece of white sapwood. Doesn't really look like that on the top, which when we flip it over, we actually get that beautiful kind of tan hickory look across the whole thing. As you can imagine, being that this was hickory, it took quite some time to sand, even with the 6-inch Mirka sander, but we got it done, and it is looking fantastic. I do have a word of warning here. I did have kind of a de-lamination in the hickory, and I filled that with the CA glue. I would say it was about 1/4 of an inch, and that did not hold. It basically cracked and fractured the CA glue, so I had to sand that out and redo it with epoxy. So if you have more than just little cracks, make sure you use something a little bit more robust than the fast-acting CA glue. Using my Kreg track saw, I'm squaring up the ends of the table and making it down to the final length that we wanted, which, if I remember correctly, was about 94 inches for this table. Once we had it cut down to its final length, it was back over to the table saw, because with the new Harvey table saw, I have a full 36-inch capacity with the table saw fence. This was not light, being that it was hickory and pretty much the size of a 4x8 sheet of plywood. A little bit skinnier than that, but very, very heavy to move around. But the full 36-inch capacity of that table saw was awesome, and because it's a table saw, you get a perfectly wonderful rip cut and a nice smooth edge to boot. Alrighty, we are jetting to present day, where I want to thank today's sponsor, who is Carolina Shoes. We're doing a huge project right now, putting a dormer on the house. Obviously, we need to have our feet protected. We need to be able to climb up ladders comfortably. And I have mostly been wearing a pair of the Carolina hiking shoes, which have a aluminum toe in them, I believe, and they got plenty of grip for treading around on that 12-12 pitch roof. I really, really love the new lightweight shoes, which, as you see, I got all dirty the other day, but they have no grip for something like that. They do also have protection for your toes, and that's something that you don't think about for more than just protecting your feet. But when I'm handing sheets up there, I can lay them on my toes so that I can get a good grip by getting my fingers underneath there, by laying them on those composite aluminum or steel toe protection, and I get a good grip and hand them up there to my buddy. You guys can save 25% off any of the shoes at the link in the description below by using the code DIYTyler. Again, DIYTyler for 25% off any of the shoes or boots at the link down in the description below. Thanks, Carolina, for sponsoring this video. Now, I do have a young nephew running around the house where this table is going to go, and his head right now is pretty much temple directly to corner, and we want to make sure that's not going to happen. So I'm going to use my DIY track saw and nip off those corners where we have pretty much a double 45 bevel there, and it looks awesome. And then to protect your hands so you don't get any splinters, not that you really get that so much with hickory, we're going to do an 1/8 round over just to soften those edges a little bit and give the table a really nice smooth look. And I do want this table to look awesome. I'm hoping to get some good pictures as a showpiece, as I might end up building tables for the physical side of the business. So I am making sure this table looks pretty fantastic. I've never really gone with a light to try to find swirl marks, but we're doing that today, and we're getting rid of them by marking out with a pencil, and then I will come back with the sander to knock down any of those areas. Once all of the sanding is done, we want to make sure all of that time was not for waste, and we want to make sure we clean off very, very well before applying the finish. So I'm going to be using some compressed air. I'm then going to move to a brush, and then we're going to use a tack cloth to make sure we have any dust particles removed. For this table, I am going to be using Rubio Monocoat Pure. This finish is pretty sweet. It's only the second or third time that I have used it, but a very, very little bit of this goes a very long way. It smells fantastic in the shop. Hopefully it's not going to kill me someday, but it smells great, and it goes on very, very easy just by kind of squeegeeing it all over the tabletop, which we will show you in a second. So I think I used 2 tablespoons for each side of this table of the Rubio Monocoat itself. And then you have a ratio for the accelerator or the hardener that goes into the finish. Make sure you mix that up thoroughly, and then we will apply it by just dumping onto the table and squeegeeing around evenly. Just like with the sanding, I am starting the finish application on the bottom of the table so that I can apply the finish and then flip it over and work on the top before the finish even cures. The Rubio Monocoat, you apply it, you buff it in, and then you actually wipe off any excess, and at that point I've just flipped it over and started working on the top, which is one of the real beauties of the Rubio Monocoat, is I can do a whole tabletop like this in one evening and I am done and ready to go. I did actually go through and apply a second coat of the Rubio Monocoat just so that we had a little bit thicker finish, because this is going to be a kitchen table that is used 3 times a day and probably completely throughout the day. So we want to make sure we have a nice solid finish on this hickory table. And that is that for the finish, looking beautiful and smelling fantastic. And as I mentioned, as I was building this tabletop, I thought that I had wasted all of this beautiful hickory material because the tabletop was too flimsy. I thought that it was all ruined. But I decided to do an apron frame that will go underneath the table and kind of act like a torsion box to hold the table nice and firm. I milled up a little bit more material and used some screws and then doweled over those screws so you don't see them. And that combined with some wood glue made for a really nice firm torsion box assembly that we were able to use some tabletop clips to screw onto the table. To make a grooved slot in the table apron so that it allows for expansion and contraction of this wide tabletop, I used a biscuit joiner to cut those grooves at the right depth, and then I flipped the tabletop over on an ice cloth, put our torsion box assembly on there, and use my tabletop clips, which are just a bulk item that I get from Amazon, to fasten the skirt onto the table. And then it is time to fasten on our legs that I welded and painted myself. And I was going to put that all into one video here, but it simply got too long and I wanted to make sure I gave those legs the time of day. So they're a 1x3 welded rectangular tubing, and we will go into that in a future video. But I made sure that they were evenly spaced on the table, and I'm actually using threaded inserts on here so that if my sister and brother-in-law move, it unthreads very, very easily and will be able to be reassembled hundreds of times over their lifetime. Once those inserts are flush, we can use the bolts to fasten the table legs to the table, and you can see that I'm using some small strips of sandpaper to make sure that the leg is completely square to the tabletop. Once I got everything together, I promptly took it apart and we moved the table down to my sister and brother-in-law's house. Everything went successful, no damage, and the table is looking fantastic in their home. And we promptly sat right down and had a Sunday brunch on there, and I'm pretty sure that it tasted better over this table. Thanks for watching, everyone. Stay tuned and we'll show you how you make those X table legs.